sometimes we believe in something so much, and we really want it to work. And as the water is climbing higher and higher and higher, we're just saying, I really believe it'll happen. You know what? As you said, fail fast, pivot, and move on to something else that's really going to work.
My guest, once again, Shain, founder and CEO of Paraflight Aviation and OregonFlights.com. Based here on the East Coast, but servicing clients worldwide, Paraflight is a full-service corporate aviation company dedicated to providing dependable, compassionate, and customized care and service to business executives and medical teams worldwide. OregonFlights.com provides transplant centers with full air and ground transportation of life-saving organs. They ensure the most efficient transfer of organs and transplant teams nationwide. Their nationwide network of jets, helicopters, and emergency transport vehicles are always on call, ready to transport an organ, transplant team, recipient, and family members door to door. Sim, it's a great honor and a privilege to have you back on Mind Your Business.
Likewise, number 3, that's really special.
It is special.
I'm very excited to be here once again.
Very special. So let's first, walk us down. It's been a while since we were on the set together. 2-3 minutes. What's Paraflight all about?
So Paraflight is a full-service aviation company. We cater to business executives. We cater to organ transplant teams. We have an air ambulance division, medical escorts, and of course we have our charity component where we help people get wherever they have to go, hospitals, medical centers, and we do some great things for children, special helicopter trips and jet trips whenever we can.
And I remember that it's actually a mitzvah and the right thing to give a shout out to Shlomo Zakheim, the impression that he made on you.
Absolutely. He's been my mentor in charitable work and in business ethics, and I do this in his memory.
Now, tell us how you got into aviation. Do you have a pilot's license?
I don't. I actually wanted to be a helicopter pilot. That's all I ever wanted to be. But my family is not too keen about that, so I'm going to stick to what I do best. I'm not telling you that I'll never do it, but definitely not yet.
So how did you get into this space? So
I started my EMS career going back in 1993. I'll go back a little further. When I was 7 years old, my dad was involved in a local EMS organization called Hatzalah, and I used to see him drop everything. He used to leave our home and he used to leave his business. He would drop everything to go save a life, and I said, when I get older, that's what I'm going to do. And then when I was older, or somewhat older, when I was 20 years old, I said, today is the day. And I picked up the phone and I made my first phone call, and I was in an EMT course literally within a week, and I really haven't turned back. And in 2005, I started my paramedic course. 2007, I became a paramedic. And in 2008, I started flying actually for Shlomo Zakheim, doing charitable trips around the country and around the world. And unfortunately, he got sick, secondary to his exposure at 9/11. And that's actually where I had met him. I met him soon after that, and he made such a strong impression on me about being able to give back and being able to do things for people who couldn't do it on their own. And when he got sick, secondary to his exposure, he had a very large ambulance company in New York City. He lost 14 of his personnel that day, and he spent greater than 30 days at Ground Zero. And because of the time that he spent over there, he ended up developing leukemia, and he passed away. And before he did that, he actually called me in because, as I mentioned, I used to fly on his private jet. Think about this. He had his own private jet that he used for business. Quiet guy, everything under the radar, but he had it, and he would, when he wasn't using it for his business, he would send myself and other paramedics around the country and around the world with people who need to get to specialty centers. So at some point we owned 3 pharmacies together, myself and Steve, and then right before he passed away, he called me into his room in Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and he said, I want you to take my jet, and I wanted to go change the world. And I didn't believe that he was going to pass, but unfortunately he did. It was in 2013. I didn't take his jet. I suggested to his family that they sell it. It was too overwhelming for me to do. But what I do in his memory and the memory of others who have passed.
Now, Sim, I fortunately know you for a very long time. And anyone that knows Sim and of course loves him. Anyone that knows him loves him. One of your trademarks is that you're a big listener. You listen with both ears, as the expression goes. Perhaps you could share some advice that you've, whether it's from Shlomo's Zecharna Livracha, whether it's from others, over the years, tips, tidbits that made an impact, and you have then incorporated into your daily MO.
So I think the one thing that I've always learned from Shlomo is that, especially when it comes to charity, charitable events that you can do, things that you can do for others, is always look for a reason. Always look for the ability to be able to say yes. It's very simple to say no, right? If it's something that's complicated or a little bit of challenging, all you have to do is say, no, I can't do it. But if you try to find the ability, you try to find a way to say yes. I think Shlomo used to say, if it's difficult, we do it. If it's impossible, we try harder.
I mean, it's an amazing quote. It's just amazing. I mean, it's a great line, but an amazing quote. Whew. Any other lessons? I just want to hold on to this because you kind of take it in from anything else that comes to mind.
You know, one of the things that I also learned from him and I learned from others is that when you're a leader, you have to lead from the front. When somebody's a military general, when they're sitting up at the front with their troops feel it. And same thing in a business. Whatever you might do, you should know every aspect of your business, and no job should be too big or too small. Nothing should be below you. If there's something that you expect your employees to do, you should be able to do that as well. And you should really understand every aspect of your own business, so that if somebody walks out on you, if somebody quits, your business doesn't fall to the ground.
Let's go back to Paraflight, just so that the listeners out there, because there are many that I either they can benefit directly, or they have a client or a relative that could benefit. Maybe break out some of the areas that Paraflight services? What are some of the, and even maybe give some recent examples of how you've changed the world, whether it's through the organ the flight structures that you have regarding the organ flights, or regarding Paraflight.
So as I mentioned, Paraflight is a corporate aviation company. And the reason we call it corporate is because we try to focus on that, which means that there's only X number of hours in a day. There's only 7 days in a week, 52 weeks in a year. This is time that you're never, ever going to get back. You can always make more money, but you can never make more time. So we try to focus on that. Take the business executive who needs to get to 1 or 2 states. They got to go check out their properties. And if they would do it going through typical commercial aviation routes, they're going to have to get up early in the morning. They have to go to the airport. They have to get through TSA, whatever airport they might be in. It could depend on if they're going to wait an hour or 2 hours to get through. There could be delays. And then they have to go. Sometimes these airports they're not in a major area, and all of a sudden they have to take a connecting flight, or they have to drive 3 hours. When you come to corporate aviation, there are hundreds of airports all around the country that are not large commercial airports, but they can land a private jet on there. So we really help people maximize on their time. So that's our corporate side. Then we have our organ flights division, which is where we focus on helping transplant teams and organs get wherever they have to go, whether they're for our clients or for our competitors or for anybody else. When somebody's in a bind, we ask them to call us. We actually built an organ flights app, which is similar to, I guess, the closest thing I would bring it to is a Uber for organ flights. So instead of us having to pick up a phone to call 30 different operators at 3 o'clock in the morning, we could just send out a request. We have over 100 operators on our app right now already, and it's growing every day or every week. But as that grows, we're able to increase our impact, and we're able to get jets much quicker. We have an air ambulance component, which is it's one of our smaller divisions, mostly done charity. We do it really at cost to help people get wherever they have to go. And then we have a medical escort division. Medical escort division there are many times that people, whether it's for medical or for personal, need to be able to fly, and it gets very challenging for them to go. So we provide both medics, nurses, or physicians who will go along with these people on their flights. I've done it myself. I do it all the time. I've taken people who wanted to do special trips. So after the pandemic, when travel started opening up again, and people want to be able to travel to other countries, and they might want to fly on a family trip, and they have elderly parents or grandparents, and it's a little overwhelming to take them on there. So they'll take one of our medics or nurses, and we'll fly along with them, and we'll take care of everything, getting them cleared through TSA and customs. Sometimes they need some supplemental oxygen on the trip. We take care of that as well. I did a trip actually a couple weeks ago to Israel where there was a patient who was on dialysis. They needed 5 days of dialysis. We worked with the family to arrange that they would have dialysis in Israel when they were there. And we dropped them off, and we picked them up afterwards.
At the end of the day, every detail is looked after.
Correct.
And that's what I'm picking up.
Right. So we call ourselves we're a real concierge service. Attention to detail. We tell the families, we tell our clients, you focus on your business, and we're going to focus on your flights. So when it comes to our corporate flight, we take care of to make sure that they have hot meals on board. We make sure that there's a ground transport for them. We have some clients who will take a helicopter to go to 4 different states, and as soon as they land, they get off. There's a Sprinter or an SUV, depending on how many people they have, waiting for them. There's meals literally at every place. We've even set up lunch for clients in some of their, in other states, simply because they wanted to have a quick meeting there, and we take care of everything when it comes to their travel.
Unbelievable. Before we go to a commercial break, how could people find out more about your incredible array of services?
They can either call us 844-538-1911 or our website, Paraflight.aero. That's Paraflight.aero. We're on all social media platforms. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. Wherever you look, you should be able to find us. Not as many as you are on, but close.
Mind your business with Yitzchok Saftlas right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. My guest is none other than Shain, founder and CEO of Paraflight Aviation and OrganFlights.com. Now, when we were on commercial break, so I see Sim is looking at his phone. I'm saying, Sim, listen, I don't be nosy here, but is that tell me what goes on at like a typical day. He said, yeah, I just booked a flight. Someone's got to get there. Is it tomorrow morning, Florida? I said, okay, I'm not asking for anything confidential, but short of that, share with the listeners, what is a typical, what you just did, which to you, I mean, nothing's boring to you. I know you live what you do. But it may seem like, okay, I do this in a day's work. Could you please share a typical scenario of what Paraflight does on a daily basis?
So on a daily basis, we really try to incorporate and really assist businesses and transplant teams. That's really what we try to do. And
some real stories.
And of course, we try to get as much time as possible. But one of the things that we offer is that if we could do it for an organ flight, if we can get you an aircraft in 2, 3, or 4 hours, then we could do the same thing for business. And business emergencies do happen. So as you mentioned, I was on my phone during the commercial break, and one of my clients called up that they have a closing for tomorrow. And they were under the impression that they did not have to be there for the closing, and they were just going to sign the paperwork and send it over. However, somebody, I'm not sure who, let them know that they have to be there. So in order for them to not totally kill their entire day tomorrow, which means probably waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
And let's also understand, which state or region are they coming from? Where are they going to?
Right. So this is actually going from New York to Florida, to South Florida tomorrow morning for a closing. The closing is set for 10 a.m., right? They have a responsibility for something that they need to be back in the afternoon. I'm not sure if it's a wedding or some other responsibility. So instead of them literally killing their entire day, they're going to take off at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. They're going to land around 9:30. They'll be at their closing at 10. And an hour later, they're going to be on a flight coming home. This is something that is impossible to do.
With commercial.
It's not possible. So if you need to be able to capitalize on your day, and that's how we say we really focus on business executives, those who need to be able to make sure they capitalize on their day. Not the typical trip where somebody's planning it for months in advance and they have all the time and they're trying to figure out what to do. Here, we will take care of that. So now, this client just has to focus on their closing. Nothing else. That's not our department. We'll focus on the transport. So as soon as they land, there will be a vehicle there to pick the clients up. There'll be hot food waiting for them on the plane for the trip there and the trip back. They do their closing, and technically 6 or 7 hours from when they leave their home, they can be back.
And you had mentioned another point, which is just unbelievable, and that is, let's say the closing goes for either a half hour or 2 hours. He doesn't know.
He's not under pressure to be able to have to make a flight. He's not under pressure.
How does that work? You told me during the commercial break, said, yeah, that person could be in touch with us, and 11 minutes later, he could be on a plane back.
Correct. So what we do is we let them know that as soon as they're heading back to the airport, they should let us know that they're going. So we will call our pilots, and they're going to file their flight plan based on the ETA of that client to the airport. They get on the plane, and usually about 11 minutes after that, they're airborne to get back home or get back to work or whatever they need to do.
It's not possible. I mean, it is, but it's unbelievable. Wow. Let's talk about the organ flights. Now, again, we're talking about saving lives, it's people's lives. Yet, what you do and the way you need to construct teams and put them together and make sure that everything fits together like a puzzle. I'm sure you have some incredible stories about teams that flew in to do major surgeries and the doctors that had to be assembled, and yet it's complicated because you had mentioned to me that pilots can only work a certain amount of hours a day. You have any, like, I don't want to say war stories, but like stories that really bring home how you pull this all together?
So it's interesting. We do this every day. So to us, it's not even a story. But I'll just tell you something that happened a couple of weeks ago. We had a client who called us up. There was a trip, and as I mentioned, I think in other episodes, just something that the listeners should understand. When it comes to aviation, in both corporate, commercial, whatever it might be, pilots are only allowed to work 14 hours in a day, in a row, which means from when they start their day, even if they didn't fly, from when they start, if their day started at 7 a.m. because they had to go to the airport and they had to prep their aircraft, even if they didn't take off, at 9 p.m. that night, their day is over. They need to have a minimum of 10 hours of rest after that, no matter what. So even if your day gets pushed, your flight gets delayed and delayed and delayed. I'm sure you've heard and listened to some of these nightmares that take place where people are sitting. You can have hundreds of people on a commercial flight, and all of a sudden the pilots just duty off because they can't make the flight, and everybody has to get off. So we really work with people around that, and that's why it's important that when we do our organ flights, we always make sure that we don't trigger, we don't activate our pilots until just when we have to. So we got a phone call from a different transplant center who we don't service all the time, stating that they're out in middle of a procurement. They're in middle of an operating room to get a heart out. And the heart team's aircraft, because there was a delay in getting into the operating room, because of the delay, the heart team's aircraft is going to time out. They have to leave. So that crew actually took off and left, and they're sitting in the emergency room. So the liver team, which is actually one of our clients, actually unbelievable, the generosity of what they did, because everybody's has one mission, that's to save a life. So the liver team gives their jet to the heart team, because the heart is actually the first organ that comes out. So the heart comes out, then the lung, and then the liver, and then the kidneys. So the liver team actually gives their jet. They say, take our jet and go. And the liver team calls us up now to get them a replacement jet. Right. So we activate a replacement jet to go pick up the liver team. But that requires a tremendous amount of moving pieces. And thankfully, we have the most incredible team that works behind us, behind the scenes, 24/7. That's what it is, a 24/7 business. Most of our work takes place at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. That's when many of these operating rooms take place. And that's when many of these calls come in. But we have a committed team who believes in their mission, because ultimately it's not just a job. It's about saving lives and about making a difference.
Sam, I believe I know her, but how do you look so young? How do you stay so, I don't say so cool, but so calm, and yet dealing with this real pressure? You know, listen, I've been out in the workforce, right, for nearly 35 years. There are very few people, and there are some, but that really know how to stay cool, calm, and collected under pressure. Most people just they just don't know how to handle it, and yet you deal with real pressure. I mean, this reminds me, years ago I interviewed Captain Sullenberger, had him on the show, and it was a great lesson, because he talked about how, you know, he had to maintain his composure, otherwise they'd all be dead. I don't just mean to be, complimentary, but how do you do it? What's the secret?
So I'll tell you this, and I can't speak for Captain Sully, but I can tell you I'm sure he was very nervous, and I'm sure he was under a lot of pressure, but he had to make sure just not to show it to people. And I think we can do that in any business that we're in. Sometimes things get really overwhelming. You know, they say if you see a duck paddling in a thing, right? You see the duck just gracefully moving across the water, but you don't realize that they're paddling so quick underneath. And we do that. We work under a tremendous amount of pressure. And yeah, sometimes we just don't show it, but it's an absolute pressure business.
Well, that's a great point, and even the example about the duck, that is, it's okay to maintain a facade. It doesn't mean you're not true to what you're showing. It's just to maintain that facade, because it's not healthy in that environment. If they see you're nervous, it will make everyone else nervous.
Right.
If you're leading the pack, you certainly have to maintain your composure and outwardly in order to keep everyone else from not losing it.
Right, and in business and in life, it's just important. Sometimes you can't change the circumstances, but you can change your reaction to how you deal with the circumstances, whatever it might be. You can have a business where you just took a major business loss because somebody made a mistake, right? So you can have a choice. You can say, okay, well, whatever happened, happened. So how am I going to deal with this right now? You could either be the hero and be the coolest boss ever, or you could just be the zero who loses his cool. So just make the best of it and say, okay, we're going to do this together, and we're going to figure out how to fix it, and hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Now, Sim, after the commercial break, I understand that now you've been to the Eastern Europe region, which unfortunately is involved in a war now, and you've been involved in some humanitarian missions. If it's okay, I want to get back to that right after the commercial break, but how could people find out more about your incredible work?
They can go to our website, paraflight.aero. That's AERO. Our 800 number, 844-538-1911. And our social media platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We're there.
My guest is Shain, founder and CEO of Paraflight Aviation and organflights.com. Sim, great to have you back on the show. Before the break, we had talked about that just recently you came back from the Ukraine border. Perhaps you could talk about that and even share a couple of lessons like that. We're here in America. We hear about what's going on, but we're not up close, thankfully. And it's another world. I mean, you told me before the show what's going on. Perhaps you could share that with us and some of the work that you were involved with.
So generally when we go out on certain missions, they're either medical, humanitarian. Well, we had gone out for Ukraine was actually a humanitarian mission. And I'm actually a member of the United Hatzalah in Israel, which is the largest volunteer first response organization in the world, led by Eli Beer. I had the privilege when he was sick during COVID, and I brought him back I flew him back to Israel. Nobody was able to fly, so I flew with him and a doctor on the jet of Sheldon Adelson. And we, as close as we were before, we got even closer after that. And I know he had sent his whole team out there, and we reached out because when it comes to helping others, sometimes you could just sit back and wait until somebody asks you. But we did. We actually picked up the phone and said, what can we do to help? And he said, we need people on the ground. So I reached out to a friend of mine, Michael Vach, and Scott Orlansky, and we jumped on a flight. Well, it wasn't as simple as jumping onto a flight, because just to be able to get into there. So we flew from New York to Vienna. From Vienna, we flew to Romania. From Romania, we rented a car, and we had to make our way over into Moldova, where we'd start making our way over to the Moldova-Ukraine border. And it was in the heart of the winter. It was freezing cold. And we came to the border, and we weren't sure what to expect. So we came there. They had loaded us up with blankets and with teddy bears for the kids and candies. We didn't even know what to expect. And we come out to the border, and just try to picture this. This is 2022, okay? It's 2022, and you see families. And when I say you don't see full families, because you just see mothers and children. Men anyone between 16 and 65 years old were not allowed to leave. So even elderly people couldn't do it because the trek was so difficult. 5 to 7 days, cars, trains, walking, whatever they had to do to get to the border. And we're watching them come out. And I commented to one of the people there from United Hatzalah. I said, wow, there's so many people just coming over this border. And they said, no, this is nothing. This is a slow day. And we're watching as these parents, mothers come with their children, and they're dragging just a valise. That's what they have, a little small carry-on that you would check onto the top when you got onto a plane. And I remember turning to Michael. I said, Michael, you know what's unbelievable? We took more luggage for the 3-4 days that we are here than these others took for the rest of their lives. And it's not just for the rest of their lives, it's what they took from the beginning of their lives until now. Just imagine what it would be if you had to put everything you had. What are the most important things that we would put into a suitcase if we had to take it? And they had no idea where they were even going. And it made a tremendous impact. And one of the other things that we had noticed was that there was a small child. He was maybe 5 or 6 years old. And I recall he was sitting on his phone. And apparently he was FaceTiming somebody who was his dad. And to see a 5-year-old crying into his phone, Papa, Papa. And what's interesting about that one specifically is that they crossed over. They finally made it over, and there was this little thing where they stepped over when they went from the Ukraine, and now they're in Moldova. And we saw some families that after they made this trek of 5, 7, 10 days, they turned around and they walked back, and we thought they were making a mistake. And we started screaming out to them, saying, "Where are you going and what are you doing?" But they just couldn't do it. They couldn't leave their families behind. And they turned around and went back into that country.
Now, something that you shared here is just jump in and help however you can. Perhaps you can elaborate on that as a takeaway for true leadership.
I think you can use that in business or anything else that you do, is to be able to jump in and say, hey, what can I do to help? It could be humanitarian, it could be business, it could be helping out a competitor. We do the same thing all the time. You know, we're in the business of saving lives. That's really what we do. But in any business that you're in, what you give is really what you get. We've read stories, I'm sure many, many times, of businesses, of competitors, that people that had a major issue in their business, and their competitor comes to help them. There was a story that I read probably about 6 months ago about a company they were in the meat business. And something happened with their trucks or their freezers or refrigerators, and they lost everything. And their biggest competitor came to them and said, hey, we'll give you guys whatever we have. Sell meat, sell chickens, whatever you can to your clients, because we want to make sure. And you know what? What goes around really comes around. For good, and sometimes not for good. When you do good things for other people, you get paid back manyfold.
Perhaps you can also expand on a quote. What we take for granted can be life-changing for others. Now, whether it's business or not, perhaps you can expound on that.
So in business, I try to always learn from others, and that is never to get so comfortable to think that everything is just perfect and nothing's going to change. You can lose your biggest clients in one day, and sometimes you can get your biggest clients in one day. But don't take it for granted. Think of your clients as your lifeline, as something, and make sure to always thank them, and make sure to always appreciate them. And if there's any issues, try to address them. Because it's in the world of business, everybody's trying to get a step up or try to do something even better. But if you have a commitment to them, your clients are going to recognize that and they're going to appreciate it.
Talking about business now, there's a line that you shared it earlier in the show. It's very easy to say no. The hardest part is saying yes. And sometimes the inverse is true. Perhaps you could break that out and explain that as it applies to business.
So, as I mentioned earlier in the show about my friend Steve, that he would say it's always important to try to figure out how to say yes. And as I mentioned, his quote is, "If it's difficult, we do it, and if it's impossible, we try harder." But that, I think, is really when it comes to the charity and the giving to others. I think when it comes to business, there are many times that you have to learn how to say no. And I believe it's called the Tom Hanks rule. Tom Hanks is a successful actor, and when actors start, they'll pick anything they can get because they want to try to get their feet wet, and they want to be able to jump in. And Tom Hanks didn't do that. Tom Hanks would actually he would wait for that perfect part to come in. And I think when it comes to business, and he would always say no. That was called the art of saying no until he got the right one. I can't tell you that it's the right thing to do in the acting business. I don't know. Because
Okay, I mean, the flip side of that is, especially when someone's starting out, build life experience.
Right. But it's But it's very important to be able to say no on certain things in your business. So you have a core in your business of what you do. And I'll tell you that we made this mistake early on. I made this mistake early on when I started. So we started with air ambulance and then medical escort. And then we started doing event medical. And then we said, if we're doing event medical, somebody said, hey, why don't you do a security? I said, okay, we're going to open a security company. But I realized at some point that we're going to drop something because it's just too much for us to do. So when it comes to business, you need to focus on what your core is. Make sure you don't weaken it. Take things that really help your business grow. Don't just do it because you're worried somebody else is going to take it or somebody else is going to do it. And it can work like that for clients too. If you have somebody who's just very, very difficult and it's not going to work for you and it's going to weaken your business, sometimes you just have to tell a client that we might not be the best fit. And that's okay. They'll respect that. Because you don't want to find out that you're going 6 months, a year, or 2 years down the line, and you're not giving them what they need, and they're not giving you what you need. So you might as well just be straight up with them and say, you know what, I don't think we're a good fit right now.
It's a great lesson, and if I may, something that you shared earlier on, I shared again off the air. You're familiar, again, in the medical space, of some companies that during the recent pandemic, they had, let's say, overextended themselves, or they pivoted very quickly into other businesses that was not really their core space. And now they're left with a tremendous amount of inventory, et cetera. Also, along the lesson of really knowing your core strengths, perhaps you can elaborate on that.
Right. So while we're in the medical space, as you know, we did have opportunities where people came to us during the pandemic saying, hey, perhaps you guys can do COVID tests. Perhaps you can get involved in sanitizer, N95. There were so many things and resources, and we decided to focus on what we do best, which is aviation. So yes, we did anything involved in aviation. So we flew plasma tests to the Mayo Clinic. We flew ventilators for people who needed it. But we really kept out of that. There were people who were in real estate businesses who started manufacturing and selling sanitizer. But now that everything wound down, they're stuck with hundreds or thousands of pallets of sanitizer that they can't get rid of. So they're paying storage fees in facilities, and they don't even know what to do with it because it's not something that their business core was set up to do, and now they don't even know where to turn. So stick to what you do best, focus on what you do best, and grow your business.
You know, it's a great point, because even though the recommendation during those challenging during that challenging period, roughly 2 years ago, was that, be creative and be open to unique ways of staying afloat and alive. But what you're saying is it's okay to keep that open, but at the same time, make sure that stay within the space that you're familiar with. Like, I like the example that you still did flights, but you flew ventilators, you flew masks, or whatever it is, but it stayed within your core expertise, which is travel.
Correct.
Sim, before we go to a commercial break, how could people find out more about Paraflight and OrganFlight?
They can go to paraflight.aero, that's AERO, organflights.com, or on any social media platform, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, we're all out there.
How do you have time for that? You're busy saving lives. Mind your business with Yitzchok Saftlas right here on 710 WOR and the iHeartRadio network. My guest is Shain, founder and CEO of Paraflight Aviation and organflights.com. And because of Sim's involvement over the last few decades, he may not look it, he doesn't look it, but Baruch Hashem. But I mean, the amount of experience and real world experience that he has. On tonight's show, he has shared and still is going to share on a number of key aspects that are critical for every business executive and leader out there. And there's something we didn't touch on yet, and Simcha, I hope it's okay, and that is the importance of public speaking. And during this segment, I want to talk about communication in general. But do you feel it's important for an executive, any executive, really to be a public speaker? I mean, they're not necessarily getting up on stage in front of 50,000 people. Is it important to have great communication skills in presentation, public speaking? Is that important?
Is it okay for us to have some confession time right now?
All right, sure. I mean, again, there's tens of thousands of listeners out there, so,
Well, there's no better forum than this one, that's for sure. I can tell you this. if you were to go back, if you dial back the calendar 10 years,
Okay.
there's nothing that you could have paid me for me to be on this show.
I make you feel comfortable. But
there's nothing you could. I was absolutely
nothing. Kicking
terrified.
and screaming. You wouldn't do it.
Like most people, I was absolutely terrified. I remember when I was doing my son's bar mitzvah was just about 10 years ago, and I remember I hired a speechwriter.
Okay.
And I got up there in front of my family and friends. That's really all it was.
Right.
And I can't tell you how much alcohol I had to ingest just to get myself through it. And I realized that something had to change. So I'm a big follower of Warren Buffett.
Okay.
And one of the things that he always talked about was how important it is to have both written and verbal skills. And he always talks about the Dale Carnegie course, the public speaking course that he took. And he doesn't have, when you look in it, he tells you when you look in his office, the only diploma that he has up on the wall is that of his Dale Carnegie course. Because he believes, as do I now for sure, that your net worth, your value will increase by at least 50% if you're comfortable when you public speak. So what did I do, right? So I signed up for a public speaking course. Now, it wasn't a long course. It was only about 6 sessions. I think it cost about $800. But I knew that I had to push myself in. And I took one of my close friends, and we took this course, and it just pushed me. We'd start off very, very small, and you'd get up and give these speeches that were like one sentence, and then it went on to one paragraph, and then it would go to one page. But it taught me how to be able to jump in and to be able to pause when you need to pause. And don't use any fillers like or or anything else like that. But to be able to communicate, and it works for that in every aspect of business. So I'm not necessarily getting up there, at every day to get up and give a speech. But you present yourself. You present yourself on your phone. You present yourself, especially, on Zoom conferences right now, all the time. If you're comfortable with your business, if you're comfortable with yourself, if you're comfortable with your message, you need to be able to get it out. And I always tell people, the best thing you can do is take a public speaking course.
I love how you gave that over. It's amazing. And I'm so glad that the radio show took place after you took that course, because now you're here,
right.
And now you're here and you're sharing great advice on the topic of communication. Perhaps, and especially when I think about the amount of critical communication that Paraflight, organ flights, is involved with, where every detail has to be perfect, right? If a certain person is flying out, you can't have, the meal is going to wind up in Little Rock, right? And then but meanwhile the pilot is in whatever 100 miles away. Every single detail has to be perfect and has to arrive. How critical is it that the information, and what suggestions could you share in terms of great, effective, clear communication?
So there's 2 things that I want to address right now. One of them is the communication that we have to be able to pivot. If something's not working, pivot and do something else. But one thing that I learned, I actually had a business coach that I hired a number of years ago. I shouldn't say I hired. A very close friend of mine hired a business coach for me, and he paid for it because he said, you're missing something when it comes to your scheduling. Because I used to I would forget. I had a meeting, had something else, important things and I would miss it. And he hired a business coach. And this business coach taught me something that is so critical, definitely to my schedules, and I'm sure to everybody else, and that is my calendar. Everything that I do is put into a calendar. Even if we book a flight that's going to take place in 2 hours from now, it gets booked into the calendar. The tail number, the address of the FBO, which is the terminal that it's going into. Everything that we do, you really want to be able to document, because there's so many moving parts and so many moving pieces to everything that we do. It's important to have it, whether you make sure you have it on a spreadsheet, and make sure you have a calendar.
Now, a calendar is key, and that's a great lesson. Any other tips? Now, you shared again a critical one, that every detail, like you said, the from down for the location and the address and the technical information of the jet or whatever the case may be. But then, let's say in terms of platforms, in terms of making sure that everyone is on a trail who is let's say on an email, who is directly, who the message is to and who is CC'd? How important is it overall in terms of clear communication? I was even going to add concise communication, or maybe not. What's your recommendation on that?
But I agree with you that everything that we do, especially in a business when you have multiple moving parts, not where you're just maybe selling one item, but if you have multiple moving parts, make sure to document it, make sure that everybody knows what their responsibilities are. And sometimes as you grow your business, understand that some things don't work, and it's okay. If you can't wait for everything to be perfect. If you're going to wait for that, you're going to be waiting years and years. I remember when I started organflights.com, it was an epiphany that hit me one day, and I said, you know what? I'm going to just go in and start it because I wanted to build this app that'll be able to communicate. That'll be that Uber for organ flights. And there were many things over this period of time, the last 10 years that we're doing this, that things want to work. And what we do is, and I think I heard it actually on one of your shows once, I think it was the director of an Investors Bank who said, fail fast. Right? If something doesn't work, fail fast and pivot. It's okay. Sometimes we believe in something so much and we really want it to work. And as the water is climbing higher and higher and higher, we're just saying, I really believe it'll happen. You know what? As you said, fail fast, pivot, and move on to something else that's really going to work.
And another lesson that comes to mind, we had a guest who shared, Stephen Gaffney, that a person shouldn't be scared or be obsessed with perfectionitis. Meaning, listen, certain things have to be perfect, yes. But if you're building out a new concept or an idea, and like you said, not all the pieces are in place yet, continue to build it. Don't say, everything is not... Start to build it, and then actually test it, and if certain issues come up, deal with it, fix it, but move forward. Just move forward.
You're absolutely correct. If you look around, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, all these people all had failures. Whether they dropped out of school, out of Harvard, or they started businesses that didn't work, and they just jumped back into something else, determined to succeed.
Sim, looking at where Paraflight is today compared to when you first started, can you share perhaps a particular strategy or a number of strategies that have helped the company grow to the success that it has, Baruch Hashem, today? Now, during by the way, I just want to say that it's kind of a loaded question because during tonight's show, Sim shared a lot of that type of information. And this entire episode is going to be up by Tuesday morning on Spotify, on iTunes, and all the people that follow us on the podcast. The YouTube episode is going to be up in a short amount of time. But Sim, perhaps even just as a quick wrap up, even if we address some of the points earlier on, what are some of the strategies that have helped scale Paraflight?
I think one of our core strategies has been something called appreciation. We appreciate the fact that our clients believe in us. We appreciate the fact that our vendors work with us. We appreciate our teams who work with us. I will tell you that after every single trip that we do, whether it's corporate, organ flights, medical, I make sure to send out, whether it's a text or an email, to every member on that team saying, thank you. Thank you for saving a life. Thank you for making sure that this person's day went well. Thank you for allowing us to participate, to play even a small role in such a huge, huge mission. And I think appreciation goes a very, very long way because in today's day and age, there's so much going on and there's so much pressure that people are under. Staff are determined to succeed, and they do, and they get paid, and they're supposed to do their job, right? But if you can just show appreciation, it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost any money. You don't have to gifts are very nice, okay? Giving them something with your logo on it is very nice. But what they really appreciate is something real, saying thank you for a job very, very well done.
Very special. Sim, before I let you go, how could people find out more about Paraflight and organ flights?
They can go to our websites, paraflight.aero, that's paraflight.aero, organflights.com, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. As I said, not as many as yours, but we're out there.
The time flies, and we are out of time. What an amazing edition of Mind Your Business. Again, by Tuesday morning, this will be up on the podcasting channels, especially that shout out to all those listening on Spotify and iTunes. And for those that are going to watch this on YouTube, we're at 710 WOR Mind Your Business. All the past videos that were posted are up there, and we appreciate all the tens of thousands that many of the particular episodes get. Well, we are out of time. Thank you for joining us on this incredible edition, and join us again next Sunday night for another great edition of On Your Business right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. Have a successful week. Thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe to this channel and be notified every single time a new video goes live. Don't miss out on any of the weekly interviews that I have with top business leaders, sometimes Fortune 500 executives. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications.